Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and when I last left off with the Battle of Chickamauga, I covered Longstreet's breakthrough. In this video, I cover the far southern portion of the battlefield, where Thomas Hindman's division engaged with the division of Philip Sheridan and Wilder's Lightning Brigade. While the brigades in Law, McLaws, and Johnson's divisions were pushing west, the brigades of Thomas Hindman's division were at the southern end of the Confederate line. They routed two brigades under Jefferson C. Davis and were continuing westward. On the Union side, 20th Corps Commander Alexander McCook grasped at any Union troops in his area to throw against the approaching rebels. He found Colonel Bernard Leiboldt's brigade of Sheridan's division. They were already formed up, ready to receive the approaching rebels, but McCook wanted them to move out and attack the enemy. Leibold protested until McCook personally ordered him forward. Not knowing how close the enemy was, Leibold formed his brigade into column of regiments in order to march to the enemy. When he found the enemy closer than anticipated, he asked McCook for time to properly deploy his regiments, but McCook told him to go forward as he was. That turned out to be a costly mistake, as Zachariah D's brigade swarmed up around the flanks of the column of Federal regiments, hitting them from three sides. The 73rd Illinois got off a few rounds of ammunition, but many were unable to fire a single shot before they were forced to run back over the rise from which they came. Captain Mark Prescott of Battery C of the 1st Illinois Artillery was in a predicament. He was ordered to support Leiboldt's brigade, but now with them streaming through his guns, he had no further orders. He couldn't see the brigade of Brigadier General William Little approaching. Prescott became concerned over the safety of his artillery pieces, which could easily fall in the Confederate hands if D's rebels were again successful against this new Union line. The 36th and 88th Illinois engaged with D's line and fell back, only to be relieved by the 21st Michigan and 24th Wisconsin. Those two regiments engaged with D's brigade, and a hot firefight ensued, as D's men resolved to stand and fight rather than charge. They had pushed away two Union lines, driving them about half a mile, and were exhausted. The men from Illinois formed to the left of the Badgers, and for 20 minutes the two sides fired into one another's ranks. As more Confederate brigades made it to the field, more Union brigades did likewise, placed personally by McCook and Philip Sheridan, who oversaw this area of the battlefield. When Colonel Luther Bradley was wounded, Colonel Nathan Walworth took command of his brigade and led it to the critical area. On the far right of the Union line was the brigade under Colonel John T. Wilder, known as Wilder's Lightning Brigade. Behind D's brigade came a lone regiment, the 15th Alabama, led by Colonel William C. Oates. The Alabamians just a few months earlier had attacked Strong Vincent's brigade at Little Round Top. Now the 15th had become separated from the rest of their brigade during the assault, and were drawn to that area of the battlefield by the sounds of combat. Oates led his men around the right flank of D's brigade, but before his men could clear the flank, some of his companies unloaded a volley into the backs of their fellow Alabamians. The two sides engaged in a desperate fight, but Little's brigade was suffering greatly. The 36th and 88th Illinois began to buckle under the weight of the Confederate assault. Little, mounted on his horse, attempted to rally the men who were beginning to run. A bullet entered his back, and an aide rode beside of him to keep him upright. Still conscious, Little attempted to hold his brigade together until a bullet smashed into his teeth and exited through his neck. Mortally wounded, he asked to be left on the field to die. The brigade collapsed, but Walworth's right held on, doggedly fighting back against the Mississippians of Patton Anderson. Anderson's Mississippi brigade was fresh and contained around 2,000 men. With his left exposed because of Little's retreat, Walworth ordered his own withdrawal. Hindman ordered his men to halt. Although they had successfully routed 3 lines of Union soldiers, they had incurred a great many casualties and were exhausted. The only Union forces in the area now were under Wilder, who was holding back part of Anderson's brigade and all of Manigault's line with their Spencer repeating rifles. Manigault's Alabamians fled, and Wilder's men charged after them. The men from Alabama found Trigg's brigade near Vineyard Field, but Trigg did not engage with Wilder's men. At this point, Wilder concocted a plan. He wanted to push north and hit the Confederates in the flank, hopefully rolling up the Confederate line until he could make it to Kelly Field and George Thomas's line. However, this plan didn't get implemented. According to Wilder, because he had pushed deeper into Confederate lines, he formed his brigade into a square, with the artillery in the center to protect his brigade from all sides. The Assistant Secretary of War, Charles Dana, had been sent by the War Department to act as a representative in the Army of the Cumberland. Ultimately, he was acting as a sort of spy for the Lincoln administration, who did not have much faith in Rosecrans. Dana was wandering the battlefield. The Confederate attack had separated him from all other Union forces. He found Wilder at this point in the battle. According to Wilder, he was ordered by Dana to act as an escort for himself back to Chattanooga. Dana had no authority on the battlefield, but Wilder was unsure of Dana's authority. The Lightning Brigade would pull back and link up with troops from Sheridan's brigades to secure Missionary Ridge to the west and round up stragglers. Colonel Oates of the 15th Alabama found Colonel Little and brought him under a shade tree to die in peace. Although Hindman's troops were halted for the moment, other Confederate brigades were moving north. George Thomas was the highest-ranking Union officer on the field, and he was cobbling together a defensive line on Horseshoe Ridge that would give him the nickname, the Rock of Chickamauga.